Good morning to everybody. I'm very honored to be here and very glad to be back in Gormala because this was actually my first museology school years ago. But it's still vivid, this experience in this wonderful place. And as it was told, I will continue more talking about the museums, the more detailed examples from Estonia mainly, and maybe it's partly connected also to Tomislav's talk, but maybe it raises questions as well, because as many, or at least some of you know, we have had a very active last museum decade. I would even say that we have had a museum revolution during the last 10 years, and there have been very many changes. So, I put my clock here as well to see better. And just to mention about myself, I'm working at the moment at the University of Tartu Museum, and it consists of 4 buildings, but and this is our main building, but I have had a chance to work really in some of the most beautiful and impressive museums in Estonia, for example, Tallinn Town Hall or Estonian History Museum as well. But you are very welcome to Tartu if you haven't visited our museum yet. But these are the topics about what I will talk about a little bit meaning and value, trends, according to mainly to Estonian examples. Some examples of the dynamics between the object and the audience, and then some nice and simple ideas working with objects. And my main message is also very simple, as you can read it here on the slide, that this main message of this talk, this presentation, is that the museum is as successfully museum uses the objects, reaching the goals of the museum. And actually we have 2 wonderful, or more of course, but 2 wonderful examples of this idea. So how many of you have visited actually the seaplane harbour in Tallinn? So 5, 6, some, yeah. And Seaplane Harbour is one wonderful example how through the object, but also of course through the space, the museum achieved a very special place in the society and changed very much the concept of a museum in Estonian cultural landscape. And the other example is Estonian Road Museum. This is much closer to Latvia. How many of you have visited this museum? Of course, Jaanis have visited, of course, and some else. Yeah, less than 10, so good. Then this is also worth visiting, because this is a museum which actually was placed in the middle of nowhere. It was recreated in between of the forests, and it has become one of the major touristic attractions in Estonia. So something went very well, and it's still, I think, a very good example how to use objects and how to play with the surrounding, creating something new. And the main question of the presentation is how to improve the communication between the object and the audience, how to use the objects better. And this is the same concept what Tomislav already mentioned, that collections are means of something. But in our presentation, our seminar, we want you to talk or discuss what are the means, how we can use objects better, how we can create a better communication. So, meaning and value, these are these two most important keywords, what also Tomislav mentioned and talked about. These are the key words of the museum. And of course, we can talk about the meaning and value in a more general way, but also in a more detailed way, how we express the meaning and value of the objects. And do we want to be passive or active? Do we want to be neutral? Or do we want to have opinion? Do we want to be soft or sharp? And of course, when we're sitting here, we say, yes, we are very active. We are so sharp that we are like a knife which is cutting through the butter. But in reality, at least in Estonia, maybe it's different in Latvia, we are quite sharp in our words, but quite soft in our actions. And it has, of course, very many reasons. But I think we should be, if possible, more sharp, more thinking at least about the meaning of the museum. And that's why it's kind of linking very well also to Tomislav talk in the later part of his presentation, the meaning of the museum, which I think is one of the key questions in the future as well, and how we create the meaning. Curator, the role of the curator. Curator is a guard, has a responsibility. Responsibility how to make this communication. Is it one-way communication, two-way communication, or three-way communication? This is his or her decision, and it's of course extremely valuable. And now we are talking about these different methods, how we give the meaning to the objects, according to some examples from Estonia in the 21st century. And before that, I made once a very simplified scheme about our changes in our museums, but it reflects how much we had to change actually our mentality, our ideology, our approach to the objects during the last 25 years. And it's quite different from the other places in the world. And maybe this is also something what makes us stronger, that we had to deal in the Soviet system, in the transition society, completely differently with objects. We had different aims, different methods like we have nowadays. And nowadays, of course, we are more emphasizing on present. It's very, very strong. And why we are doing, I also like to use these short words. And I put it, I wrote here, Eve. And Eve means three important words, what I can emphasize when I'm thinking about Estonian museums. Of course, I can broaden it up, but when we thinking about the changes, then I would like to emphasize on three keywords. These are entertainment, of course, experience, of course, and in the middle is wonderment. And Wonderment is the key topic for our topic today, and wonderment is one of the major words in the 21st century. If we think about the European museums and mainly about permanent exhibitions, then we can see that there have been quite a lot of secondary museological material, but more and more, especially in the 21st century, the object has become more and more important. The originality, the authenticity became more valuable, more valued, and of course it's based on the words like curiosity, surprise, wonderment. So it goes back to this curiosity chambers, so back to the 16th century, 17th century. And we can see actually that the change of museums, what happened from the 19th century onwards, is going actually around, going back to the curiosity chambers, and the mentality, how we perceive the object, has been also changed. We want this wonderment. We sell the wonder, we sell the curiosity, we sell the surprise. So it can be, of course, very, so to say, cheap, but if we do it professionally, it would be, I think, one way how museums can survive, and also how they can earn money as well. Because very many museums are based on this wonderment, very good museums. And I think that Estonian, some exhibitions at least, have wonderful examples of this wonderment as well. So, if we think about this eve, then we of course can think, is it an eve of a museum? Maybe not, but maybe it is. We can see it in the next decades. And before we go on, then and thinking about this eve, then usually I tell to young people, to the students, that it's not so important that we use this methodology or that methodology. The important is are these three layers of the exhibition, what we want to achieve. These three E's: information, interpretation, and inspiration. When these three E's are accomplished, then the people are satisfied, because through the inspiration they can change also their attitude, and they change their minds. And of course, as we know, it's quite difficult to achieve, but still. And of course, the same the same important question is what face has our visitor? Do we know it? But I'm not concentrating on that. But is it? But when we're looking at Estonian museum examples, I'm mostly talking about permanent exhibitions. Then usually, still, although we have very good museums, we are talking about the position of the curator, because we are the most smart people, of course, and we know how to do the museums together with the architects and the designers. But we don't have very much two-way communication. Of course we have it, but I think we should have it more. And while we're talking about the participatory museum, quite a lot already. We have even printed the book about participatory museum, where the museum audience is the author is the co-author of the experience, of the museum experience, then in reality, in the museums, we don't see it. But at least while we have it in the books, maybe it reaches more and more to the museums as well. The other question is, how much do we need it? Is it really so important? Is it the aim of the contemporary museum to be participatory or not? And how much people want to be involved? Do they maybe really just want to see the exhibition? One example, what we had, wonderful example of the most successful museum in Estonian history, blockbuster exhibition. It was the traveling exhibition about Titanic. Maybe some of you visited it. It was in Tallinn. And this exhibition wasn't very participative. It was just people wanted to see it, just wanted to adore the objects. The air of the cup, which was found next to the Titanic, and things, simple things like that, but real things. And one thing they did, and maybe you know, it was the ticket that the museum visitor got a ticket when he or she entered into the exhibition. And in the end of the exhibition, he could see if this person, who he or she was, the story of the person, where he traveled, in which class, and so on, survived or not. And it was quite intriguing, actually. And some people liked it, you know, it's kind of involvement of the exhibition. But of course, some people hated it a lot. So, because you don't want to see that your child or yourself will be drowned in the end of the exhibition. Of course, if you are survived, it's quite nice feeling, I can imagine. But these kind of things are quite intriguing. But I think intrigue is a good thing. You have to intrigue, and it worked quite well. You like it or you don't like it, but it feels you, it lets you feel something. So this is quite a nice example of involvement. And when we are thinking about the museums, usually we divide them. There are object and story-based museum. And before we go on, I want to show you one short movie. Let's see if this YouTube movie will work. You see, yeah? Maybe some of you have seen it already, so it's not so interesting. So, never underestimate the power of the great story. So it's a very good example of the story of an object, as we all could see. The cupboard without this story is nothing. And when we are talking about also an object-based museum, it's mainly about the stories. And our question is how the story is created. This is the main challenge of the museum, and we have all, I think, quite a lot to learn about it. But it's good that it's kind of never-ending story, and we can improve ourselves further and further. And when we are thinking about some house museums, for example, you all recognize this wonderful building, probably. Yes, this is a very nice example of the story-based museum. Of course, Anna Brigader's home museum. Or the other museum, which has also great story, is the museum which is actually built around one object, the submarine. And actually the beginning of this museum was they were looking for the place where to put the submarine. So they had to put it somewhere. And from this one object, actually, they created this seaplane harbor, which is now the most popular museum in, I don't know, in Northern Europe, at least now. So it's wonderful how from this one small item, small item, yes, you can create something huge in the museum context. And we are like to have to have a boat to be successful, because very many museums who have boats are quite successful in Europe, if you think about the boats from different time periods, Gustav Vasa, Vikings, and so on. But of course, it's not important at the moment. Anyway, this is the background of this change. Also what we can see in Estonia. And as we can see from the map of Estonia, Estonia is a museum country. We have hundreds of museums, and I think we have most visitors in museums per capita, because now last year the number of the visitors was more than 3 million, 3.2 million visits in the museum, but the number of inhabitants is 1.3, so it's really a wonderful number. But of course we are not satisfied yet. We want to make ourselves better and better, and that leads us to the question that we want to be very trendy. We want to be ahead of Europe, or at least on the same level of European standards. But when we are searching for trends, it means that trends are changing all the time. So is it important to follow the trends? And there are, of course, some museums which don't follow the trends and are still very successful. But they are quite rare examples, I think. So not every museum can afford not to follow the trends. This is the main idea. And when we think about the one example from the past, the Soviet museum, which topic I like very much, how much it differs from the contemporary museum. A lot? Not very much? Maybe? Maybe not? You can think about it, how much actually we have changed when we are talking about displays. And we can see that some museums are not changed a lot. And maybe it's not criticism. Maybe it's not important because the values and the goals are these which needs this kind of presentation. So some museums, really, they haven't changed a lot during these 50, 60 years. But of course, we can say that in general, in Estonia, although we have very different museums, we had to have many changes in all these activities, target groups, finances, priorities, attitudes, organizations, and so on. It's a huge change. I'm not concentrating on that, but probably have the same situation. It's too much change, like usually museum people say. And also you can see it in the changes in the relation to the objects as well. So when we are talking about the objects, then there are some important keywords. For example, integration of the heritage. We are not talking only about museums, but heritage institutions. We are changing the law of heritage preservation and so on. We are uniting all these different activities. We are widening the concept of the museum object. Collection policies, we are making the changes. We are making the more mobility, objects more mobile, moving around. And this is one example of this picture. If you haven't visited it, I suggest to visit it. It's my favorite museum in Estonia. It's a coal mine in the northern eastern part of Estonia. It's a former coal mine which has been turned into the museum in Kohtla-Nõmme. And it's in situ museum. We can say that it's really a huge object museum, and it's really impressive because it's authentic. It has real sense, and it's of course like we say, it's the deepest museum in Estonia, which is true. So these kind of experiences are worth visiting, and these are the values which we should emphasize more. Going on to the dynamics and the trends between the object and the audience, then mainly I talk about Estonian examples, but before going to these examples, I wanted to show very briefly this scheme of structural identity of exhibitions. I usually use this Peter van Mesch's scheme, and it talks about style and structure and technique, but we are talking about style and structure. Style is this general attitude, general aim of the exhibition, and the structure is how the primary museological material, the original objects, are presented. What's the role of this presentation? And again, we have very many different exhibitions, but when we want to make a generalization, then we can see that in Estonia at least, the evocative style is and has been very important during the last decade. The emotional part, the museum has to express emotions. Are they cute, or are they tragic, or are they impressive? It has to express some emotion. Didactics, not so popular. And aesthetic as well, although of course it's a scheme. We are of course mixing them, but if we want to emphasize one, then it's evocative, it's emotional. And when we are talking about structure, how to emphasize the original objects, then of course systematic exhibition is quite much used. You know, it's most popular through the history of museums. So it's not popular at the moment, not in very many places. And in Estonia, ecological and especially narrative exhibition is very dominant. But as we're talking about the trends, so they are constantly changing. And also in Estonia, we are saying, oh, it's too much emotion, it's too much narrative exhibitions. And probably it goes back to a more conservative way of presentation, as we can see it from, for example, in Germany. My favorite museums are in Great Britain and in the Netherlands, where you have wonderful new exhibitions and museums. And when we are talking about the skeletons of exhibitions, the frame, the basic frame of the display, then I have two examples. One is Seaplane Harbour, which where you can see the structure of the exhibition is layered on these three layers: air, land, and water, and all the items are layered on their proper place of these areas, and which was very interesting and intriguing and useful for listening. Was an Amsterdam Maritime Museum, which is quite an intriguing museum and very controversial. Many people like it, and many people don't like it all. But it's still very interesting, and why I use this example is that before Amsterdam Maritime Museum, it's quite huge, they had all the galleries. You could go through the galleries and wonder their wonderful, the best collections in the Netherlands. But people didn't like it, so they changed the concept and they use the space completely differently. And they divided the space into three parts. One part was dedicated to the objects, to the object lovers. One part was dedicated to experience, to the people who never goes to the museum, just to make this warming up, entering the museum. And the third one was created based on stories, mainly for the families. So, and you could enter independently to these galleries, and they are completely different in their attitude, structure, mentality, and so on. So this, I think, is quite interesting and nice example how these objects, the collections and audience will make the dialogue. You don't have to see everything, but you could divide it into the smaller and affordable parts. And of course, when we're talking about objects, you could use it in different zones of the museum. We all know about museum fatigue. We're not concentrating on that, but look at this lady. She's so tired. So we need recreation zones. For example, look, these people, they are happy because they don't have this museum fatigue anymore, at least. It's an inner joke from Tartu, because Tomislav is having a good time on the boat.
Well fed always.
Yes.
I didn't know. Sorry.
So, about children corners, one wonderful example is in our museum, at the University of Tartu University Museum, where we created a cabinet of crazy scientists, and the whole experience for and towards to children has created together with this crazy scientist. So, and all the objects what we use also in the different programs They are originals or models, and here you can see small films what we have done with this small, with a crazy scientist. Of course, crazy scientist is living in our museum as well. And for example, we have these old instruments, and we show very cheap, short movies, but very usable, how these old objects actually work. So this type of movies is really easy to do, but they explain very well also the construction of different objects and items. Steam engine, for example. And of course interactivity zones, although it's an old example, but my favorite still is the V&A British Gallery's interactive zones. Wonderful, wonderful ways of presentation with together with the original objects and interactivity. But of course interactivity can be also more touchable, if possible. And outdoor zones. A good example from Estonian History Museum in the Great Guildhall, where we made an outdoor object, the storyline, the path of history, and a new path where we put some dates of Estonian history. It's not, of course, it wasn't cheap, to be honest, but it's very well working, especially with the tourists. So it's the idea is very simple. You can do it everywhere, this type of things, but it works, and it arouses the interest also to the museum, which is next to the museum, and also this inner garden, where we have these interactive objects for the half of the year, and also very nice example how to use the objects of the museum with quoting marks is the face of history, the art project. The artist created the different symbols of Estonian heroes, how to create a hero who lived in the 13th century, for example. So it's very nice addition to this traditional history exhibition. And when we're talking about Estonian museums and examples, then two companies have been most important. Estonian is so small, so we don't have very much competition between the companies. But if you visit some of the museums in Estonia, you can recognize immediately the pattern of these two companies. One company is like Strelka, who has whose language is very sensitive, very soft, very sweet and neat, and very integrated environment. Very nice and cozy, maybe is one good word. The other company is Coco Architects, whose language is very powerful, simple, monumental, strong materials like metal, contemporary design integrated into the old one. So what's old is old, what's new is new. So it's quite interesting how these two companies actually changed the language, how we see the museums during the last decade. Probably there are very many companies in Europe who has a similar effect, but in Estonia you have these two companies who actually gave the face to the revolution, the museum revolutions. And some examples about talking about the trends. And I made a ski. I like skis. One part is more based on stories, and the other part is more based on objects. And story line has, I wanted to express three important key methodologies. One is personal approach, narrative, storyline, and time travel. When we're talking about Estonia, then we don't have very much this personal approach in the permanent exhibitions. We have it, but it's not so strong. In the same time, when we look at the trends in Europe and in the world, we can see it's extremely popular. And if you think about who won your best museum award in Europe, it was the Museum of Innocence, not the Seaplane Harbour. Well, we were, of course, very sad. But it shows the trend, actually. The trend that the personal approach, the subjectivity, is extremely important. The personal view of the memory, the new way of seeing is valued, and it's becoming more and more important. This kind of showing the personal detail of personal story in the Orhan Pamuk Museum of Innocence in Istanbul. And of course, one example is also Liberty Museum, which won the Kenneth Hudson Prize in this competition. So it shows the changing mentality and this personal approach. I think it is very, very important change.